Faith is one of the most powerful forces in the life of a believer. It's not merely a set of beliefs or a religious tradition. It is the foundation of our relationship with God, the lens through which we view our world, and the key that unlocks doors we could never open on our own. Faith moves us from simply knowing about God to truly trusting Him, believing that He is who He says He is and that He will do what He has promised to do. When we walk by faith, we are allowing God to lead us, to guide our steps, and to open doors that we could never have imagined. This kind of faith is not passive. It's active, dynamic, and alive. Faith calls us to step forward even when we can't see the whole picture, trusting that God is already there, preparing the way. Faith opens doors, not only in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, allowing us to experience God's power, His provision, and His purpose in ways we could never achieve through our own efforts. In Revelation 3:8, we find a powerful promise. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. Think about that for a moment. God Himself has opened a door before you, a door that no one, not a person, not a circumstance, not even the enemy. This door represents opportunity, blessing, and purpose. But this door requires something from us. It requires faith to walk through it. God opens the doors, but He invites us to step forward in trust. Too often, we stand before an open door, hesitant, uncertain, and afraid to move. We see the opportunities God places before us, but we allow doubt, fear, or a desire for control to hold us back. But faith calls us to trust, to step forward even when we don't have all the answers, to believe that if God has opened a door, He will be with us every step of the way. Consider the story of Abraham. God called Abraham to leave his homeland, his family, and everything familiar to go to a land that He would show him. Imagine the uncertainty Abraham must have felt, the questions he must have had. God didn't give him a detailed map or a clear timeline. He simply gave him a promise and an open door. And in faith, Abraham stepped through that door, not knowing where the journey would take him, but trusting in the one who called him. Abraham's faith opened doors not only for himself, but for generations to come. Because of his obedience, God established a covenant with him, promising that his descendants would become a great nation, and that through him, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Abraham's faith was the key that unlocked God's plan, a plan that was far greater than anything he could have imagined on his own. And in the same way, our faith has the power to open doors that lead to blessings and purpose beyond our comprehension. Faith is not just about having confidence in the outcome. It's about having confidence in God. When we trust Him, we recognize that He sees the whole picture, that He knows what lies ahead, and that He is perfectly able to provide for us, protect us, and lead us in the right direction. Faith doesn't remove all questions or fears, but it gives us the courage to move forward despite them. It allows us to say, Lord, I don't know exactly where this path leads, but I trust that You are with me, and that is enough. Faith is a surrender of our need to control, a release of our desire for certainty, and a commitment to follow God's leading, even when we don't fully understand. This kind of faith is the key to experiencing God's power in our lives, to seeing doors open that we could never open on our own. Sometimes the doors God opens are unexpected. They may not look like the doors we would choose, and they may lead to places we wouldn't have picked on our own. But faith teaches us to trust that God's plan is better than our own, that His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and that his ways are higher than our ways. When we walk in faith, we begin to see that God's open doors are not just opportunities for personal success, but invitations to participate in his purpose, to be a part of his kingdom work, and to make a difference in the lives of those around us. Faith opens doors to a life of meaning, a life that goes beyond our own ambitions and taps into something eternal. When we follow God's leading, we find that our lives become a testament to his goodness, a reflection of his love, and a channel for his blessings to flow through us to others. But there's another aspect of faith that we must remember. Faith is often tested. Before a door opens, we may go through seasons of waiting, seasons of uncertainty, or even seasons of trial. In these times, our faith is refined, strengthened, and deepened. Just as gold is purified in the fire, our faith grows stronger through the challenges we face. We may not understand why certain doors remain closed, but we can trust that God is preparing us for what lies ahead, that he is building within us the character, the resilience, and the trust we will need when the time comes to step forward. Faith in these seasons is about holding on to God's promises, believing that he is faithful, and trusting that he will open the right doors at the right time. It's about saying, Lord, I believe you are working even when I cannot see it. I trust that you are opening doors I do not yet understand, and I am willing to wait on your perfect timing. So today, I encourage you to let faith be the key that opens doors in your life. Whatever God is calling you to, whatever doors stand before you, approach them with a heart of trust, a spirit of courage, and a willingness to step forward. Know that God is with you, that he has gone before you, and that he will provide everything you need. Faith isn't about knowing every detail. It's about trusting the one who holds every detail in his hands. Let faith guide you. Let it strengthen you. And let it open doors to a life that is not only blessed, but also purposeful, a life that reveals the beauty of God's plan. When we walk by faith, we step into the fullness of what God has prepared for us, discovering that every door he opens leads us closer to his heart, deeper into his purpose, and further along the path he has uniquely designed for each of us. So take that step of faith, walk through the doors God has placed before you, and experience the incredible journey that only faith can unlock. Faith calls us to trust God in the unknown, to step forward even when we can't see where the road leads. This kind of faith requires courage, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to press on despite it, to believe that God is already preparing the way. When we come to a door that opens into the unknown, our natural response might be hesitation. We think about all the what ifs. We consider the risks, and we wonder if we're capable of handling what lies on the other side. But faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that God does. It's about believing that the one who calls us is faithful, and that if he has opened a door, he will also walk with us through it. He doesn't leave us to navigate new territory alone. No. He promises to be our guide, our strength, and our ever-present help. Faith is about taking that first step, even if it feels shaky, knowing that God's hand is steady and that his plan is good. One of the clearest examples of this kind of faith is seen in the life of Abraham. When God called Abraham to leave his home, his family, and everything familiar, he didn't reveal the entire journey or even the destination. He simply said, "Go to the land I will show you." Imagine the questions that must have flooded Abraham's mind, the concerns he must have had as he faced the reality of leaving behind everything he knew. Abraham didn't have a map. He didn't know where he would end up, and he didn't have a timeline. All he had was a promise from God and a door that had been opened by faith. And yet Abraham chose to trust. He chose to believe that God was leading him to something greater, something he couldn't yet see or understand. He stepped forward into the unknown, holding on to the belief that if God had called him, then God would be faithful to guide him. And because of that faith, Abraham not only became the father of a nation, but was also given a legacy that continues to impact the world today. In our own lives, we face similar moments when God opens a door and calls us to move forward without giving us all the details. He asks us to trust Him, to let go of our need for certainty, and to believe that His plan is better than ours. This is where faith becomes real, where it moves from being a concept to a choice. We may not know exactly where God is leading, but we can be confident that He is with us. He doesn't promise a path without challenges, but He promises to be our strength in every trial. And often, as we step through the doors He opens, we find that He has already gone before us, preparing the way and equipping us for every step of the journey. God sees the end from the beginning, and He knows exactly what we need before we even ask. Faith opens the door to a life that is bigger than our fears, a life that is defined not by our limitations, but by God's limitless power and love. Sometimes the door God opens leads to something that feels overwhelming. Maybe it's a calling that feels too big, a responsibility that feels too heavy, or a path that feels too uncertain. In those moments, faith reminds us that we don't have to rely on our own strength or understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Faith is about leaning on God rather than ourselves. It's about recognizing that He is our source, our guide, and our sustainer. When we feel inadequate, faith reminds us that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. When we feel unsure, faith tells us that God's wisdom is greater than our understanding. When we feel afraid, faith speaks peace, reminding us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Faith allows us to take our eyes off the uncertainty and fix them on the certainty of God's promises. The truth is, we will never see the fullness of what God has prepared for us if we insist on knowing every detail before we act. Faith invites us into a journey where we are no longer limited by what we can see or understand. It opens doors to experiences, relationships, and opportunities that we would never encounter if we stayed within the confines of our own plans. God's vision for our lives is far greater than anything we could plan for ourselves. But we can only step into that vision if we are willing to embrace the unknown, to trust Him with what we cannot see, and to believe that He is leading us towards something that is for our good and His glory. Just as Abraham's faith led him into the fulfillment of God's promises, our faith too can open doors to blessings, purpose, and a life that reflects God's goodness and grace. If God is calling you today to step into the unknown, don't let fear hold you back. Don't wait for every question to be answered or every concern to be resolved. Faith is not about certainty in the circumstances. It's about certainty in the circumstances. It's about certainty in the God who calls you. Trust that He knows what lies ahead, that He is already in your future, and that He is inviting you to walk with Him through the open door. God is faithful, and He will equip you, strengthen you, and guide you through every challenge. He will be with you on the mountaintops and in the valleys, ensuring that each step you take is directed by His love and His wisdom. And as you step forward in faith, you will discover that God's plans are always worth the risk, always filled with purpose, and always leading you closer to His heart. So today, embrace the unknown with faith, knowing that the one who calls you is trustworthy, and that every step forward is a step into the fullness of His promises. Faith calls us not only to step into the unknown, but also to wait on God's timing. This is one of the hardest aspects of faith, because waiting feels like a place of uncertainty, a place where we are tempted to question if God is truly at work. We live in a world that values speed, efficiency, and instant results. Yet God often calls us to seasons of waiting. Waiting on God's timing doesn't mean He is inactive or indifferent. It means He is working in ways we cannot yet see. It means He is preparing us, refining us, and aligning circumstances according to His perfect plan. Waiting stretches our faith, it deepens our trust, and it reminds us that God's timeline is not bound by our own. In those waiting seasons, we are asked to hold on to His promises, to stand firm in faith, and to believe that He who began a good work in us will carry it through to completion. Faith in waiting is not passive. It's an active trust that God is faithful, that His timing is impeccable, and that His purposes are worth every moment of waiting. Consider the story of Hannah, a woman who knew the deep longing and struggle that comes with waiting. Hannah yearned for a child, a longing so intense that it brought her to tears, but she found herself waiting year after year, watching as others received the blessings she so deeply desired. In her culture, childbearing was not only a personal blessing, but a source of social status and honor. But while others looked on and judged her, God was at work in her waiting. Hannah brought her pain, her desires, and her frustrations before God in prayer, trusting that He saw her heart, that He heard her cries, and that He understood her deepest needs. In faith, she prayed, she waited, and she believed. And in His perfect timing, God answered her prayer, opening the door to a blessing far beyond what she could have imagined. Her son, Samuel, would grow to become a great prophet, a man who would lead Israel and anoint its kings. Through her waiting, God was not only preparing her, but was preparing the nation for a prophet who would shape the course of Israel's history. Hannah's story teaches us that God is always working in our waiting, orchestrating details, and weaving together a plan that is far greater than we can see. When we are in a season of waiting, we often feel as though we are on the sidelines, as if life is passing us by. But in reality, waiting is one of the ways God deepens our relationship with Him. In these times, we learn to rely on His presence, to draw strength from His promises, and to develop a faith that is not dependent on our circumstances, but on His character. Waiting is where we learn patience, endurance, and trust that God's timing is always right. It's a time of preparation where God molds us, shapes our hearts, and prepares us for what lies ahead. Faith in waiting allows us to say, Lord, even if I cannot see the next step, I trust that You are guiding my path. Even if I do not have what I desire now, I believe that Your plan is good, that Your promises are true, and that You are working all things together for my good. This kind of faith is not easy, but it is transformative. It builds a strength and resilience in us that cannot be shaken, because it is rooted in the truth that God is faithful and His timing is perfect. When God opens a door after a season of waiting, it is always worth the wait. We begin to see that the delays were not denials, that the waiting was not wasted, and that God was working in ways we couldn't understand at the time. Faith in waiting prepares us to receive His blessings with gratitude, with humility, and with a deeper understanding of His love. The blessings that come after waiting are often more significant than we could have imagined. And they carry a weight and a purpose that wouldn't have been possible without the waiting. God uses waiting to build our character, to align our desires with His, and to create in us a heart that is fully surrendered to His will. In the end, we find that the blessings we receive are not just the answers to our prayers, but the result of a journey that has brought us closer to Him, that has shaped our lives, and that has deepened our faith. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting today, take heart. God has not forgotten you. He sees every tear, every hope, and every prayer. He is with you in the waiting, using this time to draw you closer to Him, to prepare you for the blessings ahead, and to build a faith in you that will stand the test of time. Waiting on God's timing is not about inactivity. It is about trusting that He is actively working behind the scenes. Faith in waiting says, Lord, I trust you. I believe that you are working all things for good, that you are opening doors in your perfect time, and that what you have for me is worth the wait. Let this season deepen your trust in God. Let it strengthen your resolve to follow Him, and let it remind you that His plans are greater than our own. Faith in waiting is a faith that knows God's timing is not just good. It is perfect. When He opens the door, we will see the beauty of His plan, the purpose in His timing, and the fulfillment of His promises. And in the meantime, as we wait, may our faith grow. May our hearts be strengthened. And may we find joy in knowing that we are held in the hands of a God who loves us beyond measure and who delights in bringing His purposes to pass in our lives. Let us wait with hope. Let us trust in His goodness, and let us rest in the assurance that God's timing is worth every moment of anticipation. Faith is perhaps tested most deeply when we face trials and hardships. It's easy to trust God when life is smooth, when doors are opening, and when blessings seem to flow effortlessly. But real faith is proven in the fire, in those moments when everything around us is challenging, when circumstances feel overwhelming, and when we're tempted to doubt God's goodness. It's in those seasons of hardship that faith becomes our anchor, holding us steady when life feels anything but. Faith reminds us that God is not distant from our pain. He is right there with us, walking beside us, even carrying us when we're too weary to move forward. And it's in these moments of testing that God often opens doors that we didn't even know existed. Doors to deeper reliance on Him. Doors to spiritual growth, and doors to spiritual growth, and doors to a strength we could only gain by walking through the valley. Think about Paul and Silas in the book of Acts, locked in a dark, cold prison cell, beaten, bruised, and likely exhausted. They were doing the work of God, spreading the gospel and sharing the love of Christ, and yet here they were, facing hardship that must have seemed unfair and unexpected. In the world's eyes, it would have made sense for them to be discouraged, to feel abandoned, or to give in to despair. But instead, Paul and Silas chose to respond in faith. They prayed, they praised God, and they lifted their voices in worship despite their circumstances. And in that moment, as they lifted their eyes from their suffering and fixed them on their Savior, God did something miraculous. The prison doors swung open and their chains fell off. What a powerful reminder that faith in the midst of trials has the power to open doors, to break chains, and to bring freedom. Not just physical freedom, but a spiritual freedom that defies our earthly circumstances. When we respond to trials with faith, we invite God into our situation in a powerful way. Faith in hardship doesn't mean we pretend that everything is fine. It means we acknowledge our struggles, but we choose to focus on God's faithfulness rather than our fears. We choose to believe that He is bigger than our circumstances, that He is able to bring good out of what feels impossible, and that He is present with us in the storm. Romans 8:28 reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This is not a promise that we will avoid hardship, but a promise that God will use every challenge, every trial, and every difficult season to accomplish something good in our lives. Faith in trials opens doors to deeper trust, greater strength, and a closer relationship with God. It allows us to experience His peace that surpasses understanding, His comfort that soothes our souls, and His power that enables us to endure. Trials have a way of refining us, of stripping away everything that is superficial and bringing us face to face with the core of our faith. They reveal where our hope truly lies, whether we are leaning on our own strength or truly relying on God. Trials teach us that we are not in control, but that we are held by the one who is. They remind us that our security is not found in our circumstances, but in God's unchanging character. When we walk through hardship, we learn to trust God in a deeper way, to depend on Him fully, and to find that His grace is sufficient for every weakness. And often, as we come out of those seasons, we realize that God has been preparing us for something greater. He has used the trials to build resilience, to strengthen our character, and to equip us to walk through the doors He has planned for us. The world around us watches how we respond to hardship, and when they see a faith that endures, a peace that persists, and a hope that shines through the darkest times, it becomes a powerful testimony of God's goodness. Our faith in trials can open doors, not only in our lives, but in the lives of others. When people see that our trust in God is unwavering, they begin to wonder about the source of our strength, the foundation of our hope. Our faith can be the very thing that opens the door to conversations about Christ, to opportunities to share His love, and to moments where we can point others to the Savior who sustains us. Paul and Silas's faith in prison didn't just lead to their freedom. It led to the salvation of the jailer and his family. Their response to hardship became a doorway to God's grace for others, and so can ours. If you are facing a trial today, I encourage you to hold on to your faith. Know that God sees every tear. He hears every prayer, and He is with you in every moment of your struggle. He is the God who brings beauty from ashes, who turns mourning into joy, and who can bring hope even in the darkest circumstances. Let your faith open doors to God's strength, to His comfort, and to His peace. Let it be the key that unlocks a deeper relationship with Him, a relationship that is not based on circumstances, but on the unshakable truth that He is good. He is faithful, and He is for you. Trials may test our faith, but they also refine it, purify it, and strengthen it. They allow us to see God's power in new ways, to experience His presence more profoundly, and to witness His faithfulness firsthand. Faith in trials transforms us. It allows us to stand firm, not because of who we are, but because of who God is. It opens doors to spiritual growth, to resilience, and to a peace that cannot be taken away. It draws us closer to God, reminding us that we are never alone, that He is always with us, and that His grace is sufficient for every need. So if you find yourself in the midst of hardship, hold on to your faith. Lift your eyes to the one who is your refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Let him be your anchor. Let his promises be your foundation, and let your faith open doors that lead to his grace, his peace, and his purpose. Trust that in time you will see the beauty that he brings from every trial and the doors that only faith can open. As we conclude this message on the power of faith to open doors, I want you to consider what doors God may be calling you to walk through in faith today. Maybe it's a door to step into a new opportunity, a door to trust him more deeply in a season of waiting, or a door to persevere with hope in the face of trials. Whatever it is, remember this: faith is not just a feeling. It is a choice. It is an active decision to trust that God is with you, that he is for you, and that he is working all things together for your good and his glory. Faith calls us not just to believe in God, but to act on that belief, to step out in obedience, and to move forward even when the outcome is uncertain. This is the kind of faith that opens doors not only for us, but for those around us as well. It's a faith that doesn't just change our circumstances, but transforms us from the inside out, growing in us a trust that shines as a light to others, pointing them to the one who is our hope and foundation. God is calling each of us to live a life that reflects his power and his promises, a life that walks by faith and not by sight. When we choose to trust him, we are opening ourselves to his guidance, his provision, and his miraculous work. Remember the words of Jesus in Matthew 17:20. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Imagine the doors God is ready to open for you when you step forward with even a mustard seed of faith. God isn't asking you to have all the answers. He's simply asking you to trust that he does. He's asking you to believe that even the smallest step taken in faith can lead to mountains being moved, lives being changed, and his kingdom being furthered. This is the power of a faith that is grounded not in our strength, but in God's limitless ability. As you go forth, I challenge you to make faith your guide in every area of your life. Pray with expectation, act with courage, and wait with hope, knowing that God is faithful to fulfill his promises. Live each day with the conviction that God is opening doors for you. Doors to grow, doors to serve, doors to experience his love more deeply. Embrace a faith that is not limited by what you can see, but that is anchored in the unseen reality of God's promises. Let this faith lead you to walk boldly into whatever God places before you with a heart that says, Lord, I trust you with everything I am and everything I have. And as you walk in this faith, be ready to share your testimony, to tell others of the doors God has opened, the mountains he has moved, and the grace he has poured out. Your faith can be a source of hope and encouragement to those around you, showing them that the same God who has opened doors for you is ready to do the same for them. Faith opens doors to a life of purpose, a life of joy, and a life that is full of God's presence. It brings us to places we never dreamed possible, places where his light shines brightest through us. When we live by faith, we don't just walk through open doors. We become doctor openers for others, helping them to see and experience the love and power of Christ. So let us be a people who are known for our faith, a people who take God at His word, and a people who are not afraid to walk through every door He opens. May our lives be testimonies of His goodness, beacons of His love, and reflections of His faithfulness. Let us live with a faith that declares to the world that God is alive, that He is at work, and that He is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. As we step into this life of faith, let us remember that each step we take is a step closer to God's heart, a step deeper into His purpose, and a step toward fulfilling the destiny He has prepared for us. The journey may not always be easy, and the road may sometimes be uncertain, but God's hand is upon you, guiding you and strengthening you. Walk forward with confidence, knowing that the one who calls you is faithful, that He has opened doors that no one can shut, and that He is leading you into a life that surpasses anything you could accomplish on your own. So take that step of faith today. Whatever door God has set before you, walk through it with trust, with hope, and with the assurance that He is with you every step of the way. Faith opens doors, not just to blessings and opportunities, but to a life that is fully alive, fully surrendered, and fully anchored in the love and promises of our faithful God.